experience the excitement of the hunt as the Hunting Club presents Whitetail, still hunting and stand hunting.
The hunter may not see a better buck, but he decides to take that chance. David Hartman is hunting the hill country of Texas for a trophy whitetail. David's guide is Joe Connell, who has been hunting the hill country for years. On this trip, their technique will be to still hunt through the rolling hills, broken brush, trees, and open spaces that is home for hill country white-tailed deer.
I don't know what a good trophy size is in this area. How big do they get?
Up here in the hill country, Dave, you're going to be looking at a deer anywhere from 16 to 20 inch wide, at least 8 points. That's eastern count. Probably field dress somewhere between 85 and 125 pounds.
If you see one with the rack outside of its ears, you can bet that's going to be a pretty good trophy.
Anytime the antlers clear the ears by 1.5 inches to 2 inches, you're looking at a trophy type deer. Assuming, you know, of course, that's got the tine length and the number of points you're looking for.
I see. What's the buck to doe ratio around here?
Right now it's about one buck to 2 does. That's getting pretty close to ideal. It makes the rattling a whole lot better because of the competition for the does.
It's primarily still hunting then.
Right.
And stalking.
Right. Stalking. And we'll do some rattling. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Sounds good. Ready to go hunting?
Still hunting is a technique that is probably better described as quiet hunting. In still hunting, the hunter endeavors to move quietly through known whitetail country and either scare up a buck or, preferably, see one before it sees the hunter. The best technique in broken country is to slowly walk into the wind while being continually alert and to glass often. Ideally, deer will be spotted while unaware of the hunter's presence. This will give the hunter time to properly assess the antlers and, if necessary, plan a stalk. Binoculars are a must in still hunting. This doe is beautiful in close-up. Without binoculars, the buck accompanying the doe can't be properly assessed except through the rifle scope. This is an 8-point eastern count, but its antlers are not quite even with its ears. The ear spread can be 12 to 16 inches depending on the size of the animal and how it holds its ears. Most times, a whitetail will hold its ears more up than out, so David guesses that the buck is holding its ears 14 inches wide and that its rack is approximately 13 inches wide on the outside. Therefore, he passes the opportunity.
It looks high enough, but it's not quite wide enough for what we're looking for.
This young buck senses the hunter's presence, but because the hunters don't move, the buck goes back to feeding. The bucks are moving, but they are mostly young bucks. Still hunting in northeastern forests or Texas brush country would be very difficult because deer will either see or hear the hunter first and sneak off, or, if surprised, run off. And that requires a quick decision and a snapshot along with a lot of luck, since trees and brush instantly close off shooting lanes. Even in the more open hill country, it's difficult to take a buck once it identifies man. When that happens, all that the hunter usually sees is a white flag. When the flag goes up on a buck, there may only be time to make a quick judgment through the rifle scope.
Don't shoot. There's some rubs, Dave. Let's go take a look. This is a rub. When the deer's in velvet, he rubs his antlers on this tree to rub the velvet off, which always helps sharpen his points. And you really work this old tree over. And you can tell it's fresh because all the little splinters that he's knocked off here are still pretty moist, and they really haven't dried up much yet.
He was really going after it.
You bet. You can see how shiny it is also. So there's a good buck in the general area somewhere. Now there's another rub right over here, Dave. So that means he's probably been working this area pretty regularly. Maybe we can find him. Okay, Dave, if you want to look at these tracks here, you can tell this is the doe track. It's a whole lot more pointed in the front, and it's a good deal smaller. Here's the old buck. Imagine he's trailing this doe. You can tell this track's a little bit older than this track. An old buck track it's more rounded in the front, and he's also a heavier deer. You can see where his dew claws have gone down into the mud here. And just look at the size difference here between the tracks. Yeah, by the looks of these, they're pretty fresh. That old deer ought to be just right up there in front of us, not too far. Yeah, he's just an 8. He's probably not over 14 wide. I think we can do better if we keep looking. Okay, Dave, this is a scrape. Now, it's kind of comparable to the rub that we saw earlier.
Been active in this area.
I really have been in this area. What the old buck does, he'll be standing here pawing the ground and urinating and marking his territory. This is just kind of to advertise for does. While he's standing here, he'll be raking his antlers in those trees up here. You see all the limbs that he's knocked off. So we're in a good area with a lot of activity. We should be able to find a good buck.
was hoping his scope would make this buck's antlers grow. Since Joe and David are in a good deer area, Joe decides to lead David into an area with both cover and visibility and try to rattle in a good buck. This buck is circling the rattling at 100 yards, probably trying to approach from downwind. He doesn't look wide enough, but David waits for a final side view before deciding not to shoot. When still hunting in light cover, it is best to keep low and move from observation point to observation point. If the wind is right, it is also best to hunt with the sun at your back because this is probably the view the deer would then have.
Don't shoot. Look at Dave, we got some fresh droppings here, so we're still on the right trail. There's still some moisture in here, so it's probably not more than 15 minutes old. So if we keep still hunting right along this trail, we ought to catch him in a little while.
The hunters hope a big buck will take this doe away from the small buck. Joe rattles up a decent buck, but David turns him down. But look at the height of that rack. Now David wants him, but can't get a shot, so he will have to still hunt until they see him again.
Okay, Dave, these tracks are fresh and going this way, so we're on his trail. Let's keep still hunting, and maybe we can catch up with him.
The hunters remain motionless in hopes the small doe won't detect them and hoist her flag and take the big buck with her. There he is, about 800 yards, and there's not much cover.
Why do you want to approach that guy, Joe?
I think we need to go back down the ridge here a little ways, stay behind the trees, take it slow and easy and stay low. I think we could get within a couple hundred yards of him.
Give her a try.
Because of the curvature of the hill, David will have to get within 100 yards of the buck in order to be able to see the vital areas.
Good shot.
He's hit. As daylight rapidly fades away, the hunters see that the big buck is down for good after running about 100 yards with a lung shot. we'll leave the hill country and travel south about 200 miles to the brush country of Texas, where Ken Wilson will try stand hunting with Charlie Simmon as his guide. The evening before the start of the hunt, Charlie shows Ken 3 shoulder mounts whitetail taken in the brush country. This first deer is a very ordinary buck with an outside spread of only 14 inches. As mounted, the ear spread is 12.5 inches. This is a very fine buck that was taken by John Wooters. The outside spread is an excellent 24 inches compared to an ear spread of 15.5 inches. The antler spread on this buck, taken by Charlie, is only 17.25 inches, just 4.25 inches wider than the ears. But look at the height of the rack and the heaviness of the main beams and tines on this super buck. The brush country is so dense that stand hunting is the most efficient method. Senderas, or visibility lanes, are cut in the brush, and either permanent or portable stands are strategically placed to view the senderos. At first light, Charlie directs Ken to a permanent enclosed stand, or blind, where deer sign has been noted. Ken will endeavor to make as little noise as possible when entering and leaving the blind, as well as when in the blind. Permanent enclosed blinds are popular on private hunting leases because the hunter can sit in a chair and he can slowly move and change positions with little chance of detection. Naturally, permanent enclosed stands or even permanent open stands are not possible on public land and are not always feasible on private land. In those situations, open portable stands are used. A good buck materializes ghost-like on a sendera in the early morning fog. He might be 20 inches wide, but it's early in the hunt and Ken decides to look for something bigger. Deer can walk over sendera in a few seconds, so Ken decides to look through his scope at the first detection of movement. But this buck isn't as big as the first one. As the fog clears, javelinas walk into view. After no further deer sightings, Charlie tries rattling from his hiding place in the brush. Ken hopes a bigger buck will come in to challenge this one. There's a good buck, but he's across the Sendera before Ken can raise and aim his rifle. The big buck must have circled downwind of the rattling as a precaution before moving in, but upon catching human scent, he took off. An advantage of a stand is that human scent often remains aloft. But in this case, Charlie was rattling at ground level. At this point, Charlie signals for Ken to climb down. Charlie interrupts the hunt when he finds an ancient Indian arrowhead. In the afternoon, Ken climbs a portable stand. In remote forested areas, the hunter would pack in a small portable stand to attach to a tree with a view of deer trails. But in the brush country, portable stands are freestanding, and the shots taken are typically much longer than in forested areas. Only because Ken is hunting on a private land lease, he is wearing full camouflage instead of blaze orange. When deer are within 100 yards of a stand in the brush country, it's possible to see them in the brush. In case this is a good buck, Ken looks at it through his scope. But this one isn't good enough. The next morning, Ken climbs another portable stand. Portable stands in the brush country don't provide the hunter with much cover, so movement needs to be as slow as that of a bow hunter. The javelinas are out this morning. And there's a 3-point buck, Western count, or an 8-pointer, Eastern count. But that appears to be all the action in the morning, so Ken will travel to another area. The javelinas finally notice the hunter as he walks dogs out.
Now this old buck is rubbing his velvet off here. He'll come back every day and rub, and like he's got a scrape here too, where he'll check for does and see if an old doe comes by, and if she has, well, he'll know it. It's a good place to watch. Like he's got 2 or 3 rubs and scrapes all down through here. Here we got a stand. It'll be a good place to get this afternoon.
No deer down this Sendera. The only action here appears to be a turkey vulture. On the last afternoon of the last day of his hunt, Ken Wilson climbs up and into his last chance stand. If it were closer to dark, Ken would have taken this buck to fill his meat locker, but he thinks he still has time for a trophy. With time running out, Ken barely makes out a throat patch way down to Sendera.
He stopped in the Sendera. He's in the Sendera, but he's way the heck out there. I'm gonna crank it up to 6.
The antlers clear the ears and appear to be heavy, but it's too far to tell for sure. To shoot or not to shoot? It's hit and runs to the right. After a few minutes wait for the buck to lie down, Ken joins Charlie to find the deer.
So what's your guess? We didn't get too good of a look at him, but what's your guess?
I'm gonna see 16.5 wide and maybe 10 points. I'm hoping. He's a good heavy horn deer, nice horn deer.
He looked fairly high.
Yeah, he looked like an older type deer. And that's what we're looking for.
There's no blood present to confirm a hit. There is generally hair present on the ground at the point of impact. There he is, lying down in the brush. There's no need to shoot again. This buck suffers from one of the greatest problems faced by the hunter, and that is ground shrink. When those big antlers, as seen through the rifle scope, hit the ground, they very often shrink in size. But every hunt doesn't have to end up with a great wall hanger in order to be a great experience.